What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of This Podcast Should Be Played Loud. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Chad, and today we're talking about none other than America's dad, Tom Hanks. America's dad of the 90s. We're not talking about Bill Cosby, but we're talking about America's favorite goofball in the 80s, and eventually father. And the film that he went on to direct, I think it was his only directorial credit.
Oh no! Uh-oh. He has one more. We'll talk about it.
Okay, all right. And that film is called That Thing You Do.
All right, one more time, but make it zippy, make it poppy, make it happy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doing that thing you do. Actually, not a bad song. Not of all.
Yes,
it breaks my rule.
Yes, this is what I wanted to get into right away. Alan, if you've been listening to the podcast, Alan contends that there is no such thing as a movie, as a song that is written for a movie diegetically that is supposed to be good, that is also good. He thinks Shallow is not very good. He thinks the songs of Streets of Fire are not very good.
Not very good.
He thinks the songs in Nashville are not very good.
Hey,
This is a maniac we're talking about. He's on the loose, okay? But I contend to you, I cannot imagine that you cannot admit that That Thing You Do is not only a great or at least very good song, but I think inarguably the best song that has ever been written for a movie that is supposed to be a song in universe.
If it's supposed to be a hit in the universe, it's the only one that is actually a hit. Okay, and there have been, obviously since then. You know, I like Lady Gaga's song "And a Star Is Born." You know, we've talked about that. There are exceptions to the rule, but for en masse, it's typically garbage. And this one, so I wanted to ask you, before we even go into the movie, who was it written by? Because I know the score was Howard Shore, who has a ton of scoring credits, but who did the music? Who wrote That Thing You Do?
Yes, so I believe it was written by music and lyrics by Adam Schlesinger, who was a founding member of Fountains of Wayne.
There you go. That's why it kind of sounds a little like it sounds like a 90s band doing a 60s bit, you know, which is fine.
That makes sense, and that's kind of what it is. Oh wow, this is sad. He died of COVID at age 52. He's also the cousin of actor John Bernthal.
Wow.
But tell me about, like, you know, as someone who's like definitely heard of and knows a lot about Fountains of Wayne, not, you know, of course I do. You know, if one of our listeners maybe doesn't know that much about that band, can you kind of, you know, give us an overview?
Actually, I'm not the guy to ask. I don't know shit about Fountains of Wayne.
I see. Okay.
I've
definitely heard of them. I assume their name isn't like Wayne, like a town in Jersey. Oh yes, it is. That's what I thought. Okay, so they're named after a Jersey town. That's probably why I've heard of them.
I know them as the Stacy's Mom band.
Okay.
Yeah, because they had I remember that music video, and as somebody that, you know,
I definitely know that song for sure. I wonder if they're a kind of similar. Are they similarly sort of a one-hit wonder like the Oneaters themselves?
I mean, I think that could, if for me, if they're only known as the Stacy's Mom band, I mean, maybe they're, you know, they have lesser hits, but
I guess they have they released 6 albums before disbanding in 2013, but that doesn't mean that they had more than one real hit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at all these other singles and I don't recognize them, but I remember that Stacy's Mom was part of this, like, you know, the introduction of the MILF into the zeitgeist because of American Pie and Stifler's
right. Good
Mom.
point. Yes, they were. They were sort of. That was around the same time. You're right. Yes. That song came out in 2003, and American Pie, I believe, is 1999.
And like sense. any other, you know, horned up teenager, I definitely, like, I remember the music video. I remember the introduction of that fantasy into my life of the older woman and the, you know, you're either a pool boy or you're mowing the grass, you're doing something, and Stacy's mom is there with the lemonade. But yeah, I can say that Jennifer Coolidge really, was like
Yes.
she's had multiple generational zeitgeist moments, and that was one of them. She is responsible for the cementing of the phrase, the term MILF,
Yes.
which
Good for her.
Yeah,
Thank
God
you,
bless her.
Jennifer
Thank you for
Coolidge,
your service.
for your many contributions. So yeah, so the song was written by him. Um, we have a lot to talk about. I definitely want to center this in Tom Hanks's career as well, because it's a very important and sort of unprecedented run that this is sort of in the middle of. But to start, what is your relationship with this movie, Alan?
I mean, I feel like I would have watched this on HBO or Cinemax like in the 90s. I remember it. I'd seen it. I remember liking it. It's a warm and fuzzy kind of movie.
It is.
Especially the theatrical cut, which I have to comment before we did. I'd seen this movie maybe like 2 years ago and was like, oh, it's great. Like gave it a good review. But Chad insisted that for this episode.
I'm sorry I made you watch this, but it is interesting. So
I mean, it's an exercise in what not to put in your movie. But
I guess that's true. It's funny because I liked the extended cut after you reacted so negatively to it. I sort of didn't, when I rewatched it for this, I didn't do that to myself and rewatch the extended cut. I did see it maybe like 2 or 3 years ago for the first time. For those who don't know, it is very interesting though, because it's like, this is not the kind of extended cut that is just like kind of like a bunch of extra bullshit, in my opinion.
It kind of is, but all right.
Okay, well, hear me out for a second. But like, it's way longer. It's like 39 minutes longer. So it's not like a lot of these sort of normal extended cuts are like 10 minutes longer, maybe under less than 20 or whatever. Like, this is 39 minutes longer, and in my opinion, like, very much changes the sort of vibe and tone of the movie. It plays much more like something like Almost Famous, as opposed to the sort of like poppy, zippy, happy, warm and fuzzy pop song that like the theatrical cut is known as. And I just think it's a pretty interesting exercise in like how much you can change a movie in editing, because clearly like the extended cut was the script as written, and not only is like it in a different tone, it's like a different, it feels like much more, obviously with its length, but it just feels like more of a sort of epic, like an Almost Famous, or like a JoJo Dancer or Life is Calling, or like another kind of like rise and fall of a band or a musician or an artist kind of movies, where like the theatrical cut, which I agree is better, it plays kind of like a pop song. So it goes from, and the theatrical isn't that short of a movie either. I mean, like, it's 108 minutes. It's normal movie length, but the extended cut is 148 minutes. It's like a tourist like drama. But like, according to Alan, it just has a bunch of fucking outtakes in it. I don't really agree with that.
I think that most of the things that they put, or that they keep in it, because the scenes just linger, and it's just so chock full of all this like Tom Hanks goofery. Because the stand-in, the protagonist to me feels like a Tom Hanks stand-in, sort of.
100%.
Yeah,
I mean, Tom Everett Scott is like very much giving young Hanks in this. Like,
yeah,
he looks like him kind of. He has that sort of like, I don't know, like sort of puppy dog like goofiness, but also like, upright and moral,
Sure.
Like, he's the sort of like the one nice guy that like, sees Faye as a person and like has integrity and all of this stuff, but still lets him be goofy. I mean, there's even a scene where Tom Hanks's wife wants to fuck him.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say that like there's a lot of jokes that just play better. There's a lot of context that's better set up. And, we probably shouldn't talk about that stuff until we talk about what the movie is about and go through the plot. But there are things that, like, I mean, even just the way that he joins the band in the beginning makes more sense in the theatrical cut, and he and his counteroffer for what he's willing to do to play in their band comes off less dickish, because in the theatrical cut you haven't really established any relationship between this drummer and the rest of this band that suddenly needs a drummer, other than just, oh, he hangs out at the same cafe. But you have all this extended footage of him hanging out with them. So then when he says, I'll join your band, but you got to buy 2 record needles and this radio, he just comes off more of a dick. Like, there's certain things in the movie. There's jokes.
Wow.
There's
yeah.
jokes and there's perspective stuff that just hits harder when it's like even, later in the movie when the sister's like, oh, you're going to pay me? Like, oh, now you're going to pay me? And the dad says no, like, because we haven't seen any footage of her working for free before. Or just, like, the joke just works better. There's a lot of things that it's like, it's almost like Tom Hanks was going to land on the theatrical cut anyway, but
just like wrote it and overshot it a little bit.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, it's not that the movie, the extended cut is a bad film. It's just slower. It's a little bit more meandering. And I don't think that the slice of life stuff that you get from a movie like Almost Famous really, it's all that stuff isn't as strong in this. So you might as well take it out and just make it zippier, like a pop song.
Exactly right. And like, I think it's like, it's sort of inarguable that it would be, the other version would not, I don't think would have been received or is remembered as warmly, but I do think it's interesting. Like for those people out there that kind of like to see how the sausage is made, like it's a pretty I would say it's a pretty strong contrast between the 2 versions of the movie that it's like interesting to consider. But anyway, we won't linger on the extended cut, which is not that many people have seen. Yeah. I have seen this movie many, many, many times, probably dozens of times. It was one of my favorite movies as a kid. I might have seen it in theaters, but I don't remember. I would have been about 10, but I definitely like watched the VHS a lot. There was just something sort of like warm and comforting and kind of cool about it to me, even though it is definitely a sort of corny movie, but like it really works on me. Like I just finished rewatching it today. Like I still quite love it, like despite myself. It reminds me, and we'll talk about Hanks's other directorial credit, a movie called Larry Crown, which I have not seen, but like is supposedly not good at all. But it like reminds me of like some of these guys that do these sort of like, epic kind of comedy dramas, like James L. Brooks or even like Judd Apatow or there's a few other examples that like either really nail it and like the tone just sort of lands that on that line between like funny and sentimental and heartwarming, but not schmaltzy and not corny and not cloying, that like when they land it just works incredibly, and they make like a rewatchable movie for for decades, or it completely falls on its face and no one ever watches it again or thinks about it again.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely it's a popcorn flick, but that being said, it's for what it is, that I don't say that as a slight, like you need those movies too, and it does its due diligence. I don't think it's like, I think it's more interesting than the average like biopic movie that kind of just sort of, montages through all these different events. You do get some sort of band chemistry. You do get a little bit of how those dynamics work. I think there's some stuff that's realistic and some stuff that's not realistic, and we can go through that in terms of just like, music business stuff, recording scenes, band dynamics.
I definitely want to hear that from you about those things, because like to me, I agree. Like I think it's like, we always talk about, these rise and fall sort of stories, and especially when and obviously there's a music biopic formula. Obviously this is not real musicians, but it's obviously inspired by the Beatles. It's a sort of like American Beatles. and but like it's also that's
And
still
the
hard.
story of so
It's
many
still hard to
bands.
write that stuff. And like I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't remember that the screenplay is solely credited to Tom Hanks, which I was pretty surprised by because I think it's quite a good script. And normally when these actors kind of do their first features as directors, it's not usually something they wrote. It's usually a script that was sent to them to sort of star in, and they get like a they get obsessed with it, or they get just really inspired by it, and then they say they want to direct it themselves. Like that's what usually happens. But like Tom Hanks, wrote this original screenplay himself, which I think
And
is
managed to
impressive.
impress Jonathan Demme into producing it. That was
Well,
another
yes. I mean,
name I wasn't
we'll
expecting.
get to. I think like right before we get to the plot, we can set the table a little bit on who made this movie, because obviously he had worked with Demi on Philadelphia and had won an Oscar for it, and I think they remain close. It is shot by Hanks's longtime or Demi's longtime cinematographer Tak Fujimoto, who's like one of the best who ever did it. He also shot Badlands and The Sixth Sense. He's a absolute genius. And he shot Devil in a Blue Dress. And so this was and shot almost every Jonathan Demme movie from the beginning. Including The Silence of the Lambs. So like this guy's a total genius. I think it's a very handsome looking movie. And then to just put us in context a little bit about Hanks's career at this point, because there is a pretty incredible stat by him to just show like how dominant he was, that like for an entire decade from 1992 until 2002, every movie Tom Hanks starred in made $100 million domestic at the box office, except with two notable exceptions. This movie, which he directed and is a supporting character in, so I don't know if it really counts. And the only one that didn't was Philadelphia, which he won Best Actor for. So I think we'll give
Wow.
him that. But A League of Their Own, Sleepless in Seattle, Philadelphia, Forrest Gump, Apollo 13, Toy Story, That Thing You Do, Saving Private Ryan, You've Got Mail, Toy Story 2, The Green Mile, Castaway, Road to Perdition, Catch Me If You Can.
I
That is
mean,
an insane run.
who the fuck was his agent? Jesus Christ. I mean,
That run is unbelievable. And
yeah.
like that was in one decade. Catch Me If You Can comes out in 2002, and then he kind of never gets it back. He totally face plants with The Lady Killers,
Yeah.
the worst and really only bad Coen Brothers movie that was also a flop. Uh, he gets back with Spielberg and makes one of his worst and least successful movies, The Terminal.
I
And
like that movie.
it's
That's a
okay,
warm and
all
that's a
right,
warm and fuzzy movie. I
all
worked at a
right,
movie theater in high school when that
fine.
was out, so I like it. I think it's
Okay,
underrated.
I think it's a little ridiculous.
Sure.
Then he gets stuck in sort of Zemeckis, mocap world. The Polar Express is a big hit, but like I haven't seen it, but some people like it, but I kind of don't care about any of that. He gets stuck in the Da Vinci Code bullshit with Ron Howard, and then he makes two other I think really great movies that are hits, that are all just like true story movies, like Bridge of Spies, Sully, and
Charlie
uh,
Wilson's War.
Charlie Wilson's War is in there, but like that wasn't like a huge hit. But like, yeah, it's like it really, he was completely dominant for a decade, and then it does kind of like, oh,
And the
and
end is a bit
Captain Phillips as well. But
yeah.
it does peter out a little bit after
Well,
that.
he's also making a lot of these movies with the other guys that were great in the 80s and 90s. Like it seems like they're all kind of stuck in middle age and sort of me. I mean, if we're talking about Ron Howard and Robert Zemeckis,
Yes.
yeah. But
Although I will say I do stick up for a totally insane movie that Robert Zemeckis and Tom Hanks reunited for recently called Here, which
I heard
I
that was
bet you
good.
haven't even heard. Oh, you've seen that? Oh,
No, I
amazing.
haven't. No, I heard it was good. I heard it
Oh,
was
I
good.
really like it a lot. A lot of people really don't. But it's a pretty insane, like experimental blockbuster where it's like, it takes place over hundreds, if not thousands, of years, and it's one
It's one
fixed
shot,
camera position.
which has
So
to
pretty
probably
cool experiment, I
cool
think.
experiment, but I'm sure probably makes for some really fucking weird blocking.
It sure does.
Yeah, yeah. That was
Yes.
my thing when I saw that. I was like, "There's no. I mean, you couldn't. I mean, yeah. Whatever that
There's
angle
a lot of people end up facing the camera while talking to each other. I will say that. Yes.
All right, there you go.
So anyway, so to jump into the plot of that thing you do,
Yes. Let me actually. All right, I'm gonna get a Lacroix. So recap us on the plot.
okay, great. Get a Lacroix. So it starts in 1964. Guy Patterson, who's played by Tom Everett Scott, in Erie, Pennsylvania, kind of small town, good-hearted people vibes. Him and his friends are. I mean, how old are they? Are they like they're out of high school, I guess, right? But like they're very young.
Fresh out of high school.
Yes.
Because he has his own. And we know in the extended cut that that our protagonist has his own place.
Right,
He's
he
in a
doesn't live at home.
relationship.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
yes. I don't think in the theatrical we ever like see that, but he works at his dad's appliance store. He loves jazz music. He drums on the side, and he's sort of friendly with this group that I think he probably did know from high school, even though they're not in high school anymore. And Jimmy. That's Jimmy and his girlfriend. Jimmy, played by Jonathan Shock.
Cheech.
I feel
Cheech.
I'm sorry to
Cheech?
this dude that I can't pronounce his name.
Jonathan Cheech?
And I'm also sorry because like I was texting with my friend Alex and was like, whatever happened to this guy?
I mean, he was fucking awesome in Doom Generation.
He is. You're right. Which is before this, actually. But I think he was probably cast off of that for this. And I
Strange
agree.
to think about.
He's very, very good in that movie, and that is a great movie.
Yeah.
All those. It's been great that they restored all those Greg Araki movies and kind of like one by one, and I like finally caught up to them as they got re-released. Liv Tyler is his girlfriend Faye. Steve Zahn is the sort of goofball guy Lenny, who's like the lead guitarist, and then Ethan Embry is hilariously named TB Player, meaning the bass player. Like he has no name, which is something that I noticed as a kid and like never understood and thought it was so weird. And it was just like some fact I had in my head for like decades. And then I find out later that they just did it as a joke in the sense that like, all bass player, like who cares about the bass player? Like all bass players are anonymous, which is funny. And then Giovanni Ribisi, aptly named Chad, as the band's original drummer, who gets hurt goofing around with Steve Zahn, and that's why Guy ends up replacing him in the band.
And also, I mean, it winds up being this sort of fate thing because he changes the song.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to get to. I think that that's like a key kind of moment of this, and like really good writing as well, which is that like either because Guy doesn't know the song that well, or he just kind of is bored by it. When they are playing, that all of Jimmy's songs are very sort of like self-important and weepy and sort of love ballads or whatever. They don't have the pop and the zip and the happiness that Mr. White ends up wanting, but he's a good writer, and he when they're playing their first gig together, guy just plays it fast. Like whether I forget if it's established whether he's like nervous or like he makes a mistake or whatever, but he just plays it fast, and then people get on their fucking feet and the song sounds like a hit.
Yeah, it almost sounds more like a power pop song, which is, I mean, a lot of power pop is just like punk and 70s glam rock, like recycling and speeding up doo-wop type chord progressions, just very poppy stuff. But it's great. I mean, again, it sounds like a band in the 90s writing a song in the style of the 60s, but works for the universe of the movie. And a very realistic, in my mind, that's such a thing where you might think you've written a ballad, but then, I remember working with a producer that I won't name the band he was talking about, but there was I think the band was very reluctant to try to even have a single on this like next record they were working on. I think the one before was like Nothing But. And the producer was just like, they threw away this opportunity because there's a song that really they just kind of play as this like slow, almost ballady type tune. And I told him, if you speed it up and you put a dance beat behind it, that's a fucking hit, and those things do happen. You might think the song, and the song winds up being something else in the studio. I mean, these changes are organic, and I do think it's one of the strokes of brilliance in terms of telling a musical story, where this stuff does happen.
Well, that's really interesting because it's like I've always, I mean, forgive the stupid question, but like I've always kind of wondering like what does a producer do in the context of music, and it's kind of that, right?
Yeah, well, that the role has changed over the years. So, like in the '60s and before that, but before you get people like Phil Spector. I mean, I feel like in the '60s those names start to come up, or the Beatles producer George Martin.
Yeah.
So I was about to do the 24-hour party people thing where I'm like confusing him with his manager, but. So initially, the producer, much like a film producer, I mean, depends on which, but it's like kind of like a line producer. They're organizing the calendar. They're the ones that are hiring and paying out the musicians that are coming in, because typically, the way the record industry worked up until the 1960s was kind of like a studio system in the way that films used to be made, where, the label typically had a studio space, ran it, and the producer was the person that would say this band is coming in or the singer's coming in, so it's my job to find to cast the band essentially, and say, all right, I'm going to find the session players. It'll be my decision along with whoever's doing the arrangement to decide what type of instruments do you need. And it was really almost like a bookkeeping job where it starts to turn into this way more creative job is in the in the 60s and very much so in the 70s. I don't know if you've read great music book for anybody, Todd Rundgren, A Wizard, a True Star, but his studio biography basically, it's about his life, but the chapters are broken up into records, both his albums and the records he produced for other people. But it tells his story of like, yeah, you might, the producer, might have started in that role, but because, so many creative things inherently happen with even just curating who you're going to bring into the studio to help interpret the song, that, they kind of do need to have a vision for what that song is going to be. Because a lot of the times, especially in the old days where a band didn't come up in a studio space, they don't know how to use the recording equipment. They don't know where to put the mic. They don't, they're not engineers, and they don't know how to combine the instruments, to hear like a recording of, one of their favorite albums or something. So this was something that like, I think the producer organically started growing into that role. So, typically a young band comes in, it's their first album. They have no experience in the studio. And the label might say, well, we want him to sound like this other band or something. Then the producer says, well, you're probably going to need these types of amps. You're probably going to need this type of equipment. And maybe we're going to bring in some string players. I know a guy, the LA scene was very prominent for things like that, where there's just a bunch of musicians on call, or places like Nashville. So I think that it grew out of that mythos. But then as that progresses into the 80s, 90s, and now what we know are these like, these geniuses that as music started to kind of become more exciting on the recording side, on what you could do with arrangement, with whether that be like the innovation in the 70s, 60s and 70s of, stomp boxes, different types of effects you could use, different types of amps. Then you have the introduction of synthesizers, then drum machines. Suddenly you have all these options, and you need a creative mind to interpret, what this band should sound like, And I think that prior to, when it was more of a bookkeeping job, it was like, well, the roles were pretty defined. If you were a rock and roll band, that band's going to come in with their instruments, and, your job is to just capture it. If it's classical recording, I mean, whatever the genre is, those things were baked in. But I think as music started to kind of, go in all these different directions post like psychedelic revolution and post, technological advancements like electronics, it became, it just grew into a more creative thing. Then you have your Quincy Jones, then you have the people that like, that know exactly who to put in the room because you're going for a certain sound. And then you go into the 90s and you got people like, oh God, you have producers of, Nirvana records, Smashing Pumpkins. I'm forgetting this guy's name, but yeah, it just eventually it does turn into like you hire this person for having a sound. Like even the producer I worked with on my second record, Dave Fridman, like he was the sound of the Flaming Lips, and then eventually came to be, the sound of those first few Tame Impala records and my record. There's just you hire this person for their sensibilities, for their aesthetics, and what they can tap into, and that was something that just kind of grew over the decades. Sorry, that was a very long explanation.
No, that was very interesting. I mean, I think that's a really good explanation of that in a way that I've never heard about it. Where it's like, I almost like, obviously I relate everything to movies, but it's like, I think this is reductive, but it almost sounds to me like it's sort of, if the musicians are the sort of like writers and stars of their movie, like it's like as if they're hiring a director to like do it well.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
That really is what it seems like. And that's why, like a director, if you want this type of film, like that's the guy you get. The same thing with producing, where it's like, well, if you're going for a certain sound, or you like the albums that this person produced, then you're going to want to hire them to get that vibe. Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. That's very interesting. So they play this sort of fast version of That Thing You Do, and they're also in the background. They're kind of hilariously trying to come up with a Beatles like name that has like a pun in it or whatever, and they come up with the Wonders, like the number one, and that's spelled out. And then for the first half of the movie, everyone mistakenly calls them the Oneaters.
It was very Tom Hanks, which is goofy,
very but like very clever, and I don't know.
Sure, all you had to do was put a dash between the one and the
they
ders.
Try that, and it still doesn't work. And he has and when Tom Hanks does eventually come in, he has the great sort of like drop the it's cleaner moment, where he just says like, "You're the Wonders," like that's it. Enough of this stuff. Like just be the Wonders. So anyway, so they play this song and at the talent show, and they win and end up getting a paying gig at a local pizza parlor. They start selling 45s of the song. They recorded at their Uncle Bob's church, played by Chris Isaac.
Yeah, great cameo.
We'll do a Chris. I hope this podcast goes on long enough for us to do a Chris Isaac episode.
Oh,
eventually.
Yeah.
We can talk about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Hell yeah.
And then they keep kind of growing and growing. Like, to me, like, watching this again, it's like, it's easy to talk about, like, okay, like as a screenwriter, because I've tried to write a movie like this like a million years ago about a filmmaker, like no one would want to watch, but you really have this sort of instinct to just be like, and then there's a montage of him like making it. You know what I mean? And it's like it's actually really hard to sort of come up with the like actual scenes of like of that progression in like a realistic way where you sort of then like
and
buy
entertaining.
them. Yes, and be entertaining and sort of like skipping ahead like enough but not too much, like having actual real scenes and like the timeline. It's like, well, what part is this section of their career? Is it one scene, or is it three scenes, or is it five scenes, or is it part of a montage? Like it's very difficult, and this movie I think does that very impressively. And maybe that is because they like kind of overshot this movie and ended up like being able to have the sort of choices of how to calibrate that exactly. So what happens is they meet, you know, because they're doing so well at the local pizza parlor, to the point that like they're starting to have fans and like people are coming to just to see them and like packing the house for the like hour they're gonna play. You know, a local promoter named Phil Horace comes to find them. He's played by this really great actor that I want to name because he's in a lot of stuff. Oh, Chris Ellis, who's yes, he's also in Apollo 13. I think he's like a Hanks buddy. And he's just like a great character actor that has been around forever. On this podcast, we call out character actors by name. It's important. So he signs them. He's a great character. He's just kind of like a guy out of a Winnebago that like clearly kind of just like travels around the Midwest and like tries to like, you know, find bands that like are kind of just good enough that he can take them to the next level. And make a quick buck while doing it. But he's not like unscrupulous. Like a different movie would easily make this guy like you know, trying to like sign them to a you know, these stories you hear about these bands that like, you know, they signed some contract with a manager like in their first year, and like suddenly he owns a piece of all of their records for the rest of time, right? I'm sure you've heard stories of this.
His role is a little bit strange, I will say. Here's where we deviate, and you know, we can. I'll say let's move through the plot as quick as we can, so that then we can scrutinize what, you know, what doesn't work about it and celebrate what does. Because I will say it's like basically this guy helps get them signed to a label, I believe called like not Ace Tone, but something Tone Records. Basically introduces them to Tom Hanks, who my guess is they never really reveal what he does at the label, Playtone Records.
Yes, well, that's where what Tom Hanks works for. But what we should say is this character does a very important thing, which is get them on the radio. Like that's like that's the sort of like big step that happens to them. And there's like a very fun scene where they like all hear it and run and congregate and like get to the store and turn on all the radios and like all are listening to it. It's a great scene. It's very sweet. But yes, then he introduces him to Tom Hanks, who's part of a big real record label called Playtone. Yeah. I read him as like a manager type, but I guess he wouldn't be. I don't know. Yeah, what's your read on like exactly what his job
My read is that he would be A&R,
right?
Which is like, you know, artist, basically artist relations. It's interesting. What I will say about like what I will say about that role, because it's very strange that like, yes, so Winnebago Man gets him on the radio. That's like his one promise, you know.
Fuck this. Fuck that.
Exactly. And he makes good on his word, gets him on the radio, which obviously then is going to start getting the attention. Back then, imagine it's also regional radio, right? So they're still just getting played in like whatever the secondary market, whatever the biggest city in their state is, you know?
Right.
So they start playing a couple shows. And I will say that, like, you know, what the movie does a good job of is like, yeah, then you would be part of some package bill or some matinee, and then a label comes to see you and sees if, you know, wants to see if you actually got the juice and if you can actually play this on a stage, which they don't. I mean, they kind of fuck up those first couple shows, but they introduce the Tom Hanks character, and, you know, so artist relations, it's interesting because like Steve Albini has this essay about why it sucks to sign to a major label, and he paints a very, very bleak image of it, because for every, like, I'm trying to think of bands from his generation or something, but like for every Sonic youth that somehow finds a way to make it work on a major, there's thousands of bands that just get fucking shelved. And he uses this analogy of, like, imagine an Olympic-sized pool of shit, of human shit, and you have these bands that are fighting over each other, dunking, one another to get to the other side. And at the other side is the label. So they deliver a record, and then when you finally arrive, then they say, we think you need a little bit more development. So then you have to go back and do it all over again. And then a lot of the people that play these roles in A&R will be people from the scene. There'll be people that kind of masquerade as like cool, but they're really just working for the man, and they're the mouthpiece that's there to make you feel comfortable to sign sign on the dotted line. That's the dark Steve Albini way of explaining it. But that's not true of all, there are a lot of famous A&R, characters throughout music history that, that went on to sign bands, that are known, that's their calling card, is like, oh, that person, that person discovered so-and-so.
Yeah, that has taste. That has taste.
They're the tastemakers.
The ear of the streets.
Exactly. So there's that element of it. I mean, to varied results. I've always had a great relationship with, A&R people but also I've always been signed to indie labels, so it's a different thing. But they're the people that go to the shows. They're the people that are active in the scene, and they're scouting for talent. And Tom Hanks, happens to do that. And, I guess the strange thing that the movie does that I would say maybe isn't realistic is that once the manager introduces him to the label, he's like, well, my job's done. He'll be taking care of you now. It's like, no, this is when the manager's job begins. Is like, now there's a contract to look over. You got to hire a fucking lawyer, to look.
Also, it's like, now you guys are going to be super successful, so I want no part of it. Like,
what a strange, that's the one thing in the movie where I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
I know, but I think you're totally right. I just think they want to kind of get rid of that guy, and like I get it. It's cleaner writing, and like in terms of the way the movie functions, like, yes, Tom Hanks is sort of their, he's definitely their A&R guy and works for the label, but like he sort of functions as a manager, like in the movie. He's the one that's like helping deal with their crises and getting them on the road and calling them when they slept in, and shaping their sort of artistic whatever, So I think it makes sense just from a screenwriting perspective to just have that be one person and it be Tom Hanks.
Right. Well, so then that's when the trouble, that's when the real, that's when life begins. It's like you sign on the dotted line, which I actually think the theatrical cut also does a better job of kind of presenting a little bit, at least a little bit of skepticism from Jonathan Shaich. I'm just going to call him from Jimmy. We'll just say, yeah. I think, his skepticism about signing anything with his music, because I mean, at the end of the day, they might all be in the band, but he's the songwriter. Those are, there's some, Lenny, Steve Zahn's character also has like, well, I helped co-write it, but the only person that really should be concerned with this contract is Jimmy's character,
Right, and the movie does really treat him like he's being super annoying about this.
But he's actually being more than, if anything, he's not being scrutinizing enough that there's just some sort of contract being presented in front of him. But also,
they don't talk to a lawyer, they don't talk to a manager.
And back then, people did used to do shit like that.
I think people are
smarter. I think it's like, you naturally, that's what you would do. A record label, you get your song on the radio by some miracle, and then a label come and wants to sign you. But I think it's funny that even the way they introduce the Tom Hanks character is from the perspective of this drummer, Tom Hanks stand-in protagonist. Because it's like, I want you to meet somebody. And he's like, yeah, we're going to sign to, it's like, this is my friend at Playtone. And it's like, why would they be fucking talking to the drummer? The drummer doesn't, he's just a guy that came in, to fill in for this gig. It's like, they would be talking to Jimmy. All this communication would be happening with the guy that wrote the music and is sitting just the front man.
That's the only thing they care about.
Yeah. So that's like, I do think that, like, again, the protagonist, the Greek chorus, the person from whose perspective we're watching this all happening from, I understand that it makes for a better movie, but it's not, you make this movie from the perspective of the songwriter, typically. But also it allows,
it is an interesting choice.
It does let you see, if anything, it lets you see the singer and the guitar player and the bass player and everybody else for who they really are. Because if your protagonist was the singer, then he'd have to be right. But he kind of winds up being a bit of a piece of shit, albeit very talented. Especially towards his girlfriend.
Also, he can't get out of his own way in a way as well. But you're right. I mean, it is interesting, this sort of choice of like, it's going to be about this sort of drummer, like this sort of side guy or whatever. But like, I don't know, maybe there's something more about like that it is a little more like Hanksy in a way, that it's like this guy kind of like, stumbled into this, and he did have some talent. He did have some,
and to his credit, helped them recontextual, or help them solidify the song into what it was.
Exactly. Yeah. But but what I'm saying is,
in a fucked up,
not wanting to make a movie about like the genius or the talent, like it's kind of, it can be kind of less interesting.
Agreed. I think it's like the hard part where you're trying to have your cake and eat it too is that all the important things that happen to the band for some reason are happening to the drummer first. He's the one on the cutting room floor having these conversations with the management, because also even the Winnebago man meets him first. So he's sort of seeing, all these things kind of happening. But, that's the only, and I'm nitpicking. I mean, it's a movie at the end of the day, but that would be something where it's like, even for speeding up the song, you wouldn't be entitled to publishing. Like that's because the song has nothing. No, there's nothing in the publishing. Or
all right, Mr. Alone in my principles.
I'm just being realistic here, but that's technically there's nothing.
You heard it here first. Guy Shades Patterson would not be entitled to the publishing on that thing,
unless you make a deal with your band in the beginning. Unless you make a deal with your band that you split everything, and that's an honest,
that you're all writers.
That you're all writers,
right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
That's I mean, then that is obviously there's other ways that you got to compensate the people in your band, and of course make it worth their time. I'm not saying that but I am just saying historically, this guy would just be some dude,
Right. Totally. And like, I will say it is, I did notice they don't get granular about like how the money works, like at all. Like we have no idea like how much they're making. Like for all we know, they're doing this for free, for a free hotel room and like taxi rides. You know what I mean?
And it's fun. They're having fun. It's,
yes.
Yeah. It's definitely, and labels are weird and nebulous about that shit. I've heard stories of just how like Sixpence None the Richer or bands like that just like they didn't. The label they'll buy you things, they'll make you feel like
right,
you're
exactly,
money,
but like they make exactly, but they're not like actually depositing money into your bank account.
Exactly, yeah,
that's crazy, man. I don't know if that's what was happening on this, but it is kind of they really don't go into it at all. There's never a scene where they like get the first check from like the first month of
which movie does a better job at that is Gary Busey in the Buddy Holly story.
Oh, right. Okay.
That movie,
I have not seen that. I've heard that's kind of good.
I mean, we might have to watch it for the pod.
Yeah.
But that's one where it's like you really see the process of him just like, oh fuck. Well, now I'm like a studio writer, but they want me on the road, and it's like trying to find the balance between like the output of records and then the time that you have to spend away. And how much money you're getting paid per single. Like that movie actually kind of does its homework.
Wow. We really, there's some good director talk on that one. This guy, Steve Rash, directed direct-to-video spinoffs of Bring It On and
Nice.
American Pie, and Pauly Shore, Son-in-Law, and Whoopi Goldberg, Eddie. Oh, also spinoff of Road Trip as well. This guy's like the spinoff king.
Wow.
Anyway.
So we can bringing it back to the plot. We'll just say like where the real meat of the movie here is them cutting their teeth on the road, which does happen. I think one of the from the labels
sort of state fair tour. Yes.
Yeah. From the label's perspective, it makes sense that like as soon as you have a song on the radio, you go out and promote it, and it was I think for the longest time. that was where the band would make their money because the splits were so bad with like I think historically like anything from 4 to 8%, the royalties of whatever that big single is, split amongst all your bandmates. So
wow,
yeah,
that little even back then.
Yes, back then. I mean, and that's still kind of how it is on a lot of majors. Like you're not seeing much of that money. What you get out of it is notoriety, and if you want to do, then you have maybe more leveraging power in the future to sign a new contract if you become a celebrity as a result of it. But they really do try to fuck you in the beginning. They try to get as much of that money.
Well, and not to be the label defender, but I'm sure they would say, well, we put a lot of fucking R&D into your getting your band out there. That's what they would say. It's it's studio time, it's A&R guys' salaries,
it's marketing, it's sending it out to radio,
it's photos, touring, blah blah blah. So I mean, I do get that, but yes, I'm sure that they squeeze that dry as much as possible. So the way for them to make money is the kind of same way it is now, maybe, or at least it was pre-COVID.
We've regressed back into that. There was a sweet spot then, like later the splits got 90s,
better.
Yeah, I would say, but basically, yeah, I also understand, or it makes sense in the logic of the movies. You send them on these like state fair tours, primarily to also like, have them build their chops before you put them on, TV.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
and the movie does lead up to that. On the road is where you really cut your teeth as a band, and you start seeing them really refine refine the song and refine a whole set. Which one thing the movie doesn't go into is like, where do they find the time to then write like a fucking headlining hour-long set or whatever they're doing later in the film? But you imagine, and that this does happen on the road, like Led Zeppelin famously was kind of like, I think it was their second record, where they got a little bit of attention. They were on the fucking road, and then they just had to find time in hotel rooms, just to keep writing songs, and then sometimes when you're under the gun, but you're also running off the adrenaline that you're playing shows every night and you want something new to play. Sometimes that shit does happen, especially early on when you're young and, you're doing it for the first time. So
interesting.
The movie does show that.
You're also starting to see like they're on these kind of like, playing like state fairs or like, kind of local like theaters or whatever. Like there's a really fun cameo by Kevin Pollak, I think, who's a kind of longtime, Hank's like friend and guy, as Victor, boss Vic Koslovich. And you're also starting to see a bit of the fractions form, right? Like you're seeing that like Steve Zahn kind of thinks everything is a joke and like can't take anything seriously, and the bass player is sort of like really aloof and sort of not paying attention and is clearly kind of like the worst of them. Like there's a little aside where Hank says like, do you understand, you got those harmonies down, right? Like it's like he clearly kind of isn't up to speed with the rest of the band in terms of
we soon learn right after they signed that that he's not even going to stay in the band for long because he's he signed up, he enlisted
to join the Marines to go to Vietnam. Great fucking idea, dude,
for sure.
And then Guy is sort of like the sturdy one and the professional but he's also kind of getting like a little bit more attention than probably Jimmy would like. I mean, they don't get into a whole like jealousy sort of subplot, but like you have to think that like an ego like Jimmy's is going to do that. And then Jimmy is like really basking in the attention, especially of this like sort of washed up singer, older woman who's also on the tour.
The tour that they go on is kind of like a Playtone package deal, there's
right.
And it's,
so you have some old acts and some you have some like slight has-beens and some slight like
up and comers,
about to be's.
And we should also say that like all the attention that Jimmy's receiving is much to the silent chagrin of Faye, Liv Tyler's character, the girlfriend. And we also, part of the fraction is that we see that, Guy, the drummer, I I think the theatrical cut does a much better job of making it subtle, that really he's just sort of there for her emotionally because her boyfriend is off being a fucking rock star. But the director's cut just keeps beating you over the head with like, these people are going to wind up together in the end, you know?
Right.
Which I think kind of, yeah, again, doing more with less.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, like I think the movie does that really well, and the theatrical version does that really well and subtly, where it's like it's the type of thing where the audience gets just enough of like, oh, but you two, you know, he's the one kind of sticks up for you. He's the one that like makes sure people are paying attention to what you have to say. He's the one that like notices that you're not in the car and like goes back and gets her. Like there's all these like nice little moments like that.
Yeah.
I think it's really cute. I think Liv Tyler is pretty great in this movie. And
actually, you know what? I will say, to the credit of Tom Hanks, because there's a scene where they're about to go on stage and he's just talking to a guy's character, and Jimmy's just sort of looking at Lenny off in the side. And there was a part of me that's like, why wouldn't he again be addressing like the other members of the band? But there is something to be said of like, if everyone else is kind of a child and Guy's the only reliable one, it might actually make sense for the A&R to be like, talk to your guys. I know you understand what I'm talking about. You know, right. I know you're the smart one, so help me communicate with them. There is, yeah. So maybe I'm being a little hard on it, you know, or on this movie for how it would explore those dynamics. But you know, usually, yeah, the label, the publicist, the manager, they're going to talk to the responsible one who's going to make sure that the message gets across.
Right, exactly. Like you could kind of argue that like Hanks sort of realizes that Jimmy's ego is not gonna let him sort of be bossed around by Hanks. Like if he kind of like starts telling him what to do, it's gonna create like a sort of butting head conflict because he's gonna want to be like the one in charge, but can kind of see that Guy has this sort of like magic touch, like likability that can like steer the group in the right direction, like without seeming like he's steering it.
Yeah, there is. I will say,
it's good, right, man? Like this is a good screenplay. I'm telling you,
it's a good screenplay once they cut it down. Because I will say that like there are a lot of scenes in the director's cut where they keep alluding to him being the smart one. See, like, see, I told you he's the smart one. And I just kept asking myself,
we get it.
But also, what is he really doing that's demonstrating this? You know, it's like we don't necessarily, the director's cut keeps projecting that onto him, whereas
it keeps telling instead of showing.
Exactly. Yeah. The theatrical cut, we really just get the sense. Yeah, again, you don't need it to be said. It just is, you know, his responsibility shows just in his actions.
Right.
But really, what this is all building up towards is finally having their Ed Sullivan Beatles moment. You know, really, all of this is leading up to like the records climbing up the charts. You know, it's not again, they don't do it through montage. I think it's really, but they do it through very snappy scenes where every show, every night, the stakes are a little higher, and that song is just a little bit higher on the charts. And then before you know it, you know, they've got the #1 single in the country, right? I mean, this is what happens. This is what finally gets them on. I mean, it's not the Ed Sullivan Show, but it's some sort of like stand-in.
Yeah, right.
And we really get our last act of the movie all takes place in Hollywood, in La La Land. You know, they finally arrive in L.A.
La La Land itself.
Oh yeah. And there's
City of Angels,
City of Broken Dreams. I mean, you do get a goofy, fun '90s, you know, retro 60s shticky, you know, scene where they're playing the fake band in a movie, which you would have seen in a lot of this kind of like late 50s, like Bye Bye Birdie, you know, early 60s.
I mean, or like it's like a beach movie, you know? Yeah. And it's so funny because like I remember watching this as a kid in the 90s and like being, you know, obviously a movie kid already, and just like I had no context for like what the fuck that movie was. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like those went so out of fashion, like so immediately, and there was no real resurgence. Like I suppose in the 80s maybe there's some like parody like horror versions of that.
Sure.
But like I just was just like, what the fuck is this?
They were just
they do a really good job of like, I like how they do this sort of like playback and like it's all kind of realistic. Also, Jonathan Demme is playing the director
Oh, wow. Okay.
in that scene.
That's funny.
And we need to do like a cameo corner at the end of this because there's a lot of really good ones. But
Sure.
But yes, keep going.
Well, so then the final act, they're getting ready to do their television performance. Liv's character is doing worse. She's getting sick. Obviously, she's exhausted from the road. Her boyfriend Jimmy is off hanging out with this aging starlet, and you do have this very realistic thing that like kind of reminds me of what happens when my band or any band I know like gets to town. If you go to a big city, some might hang out, with each other, but like there's a night where everyone kind of just goes to do what it is that they like to do when they're in LA or go to New York. And then the next day, then we gotta get down to business. And I love that, Guy's character wants to go see his jazz hero. He wants to just go to a small club, and
he wants to hear some really good jazz.
Yeah. It's kind of goofy how they set it up.
Yes.
But it's like, it's definitely, it reminds me of just like, first couple times visiting LA and you're staying in a cool hotel and everyone just knows that lobby calls it, go do whatever you want, but lobby call tomorrow is at 11, and then we got a bunch of shit to do that day, which is how it winds up developing that like, suddenly somebody doesn't show up to lobby call. Everyone's hungover, obviously.
So lobby call, that's what you call it, where like everyone needs to be down in the lobby by this time.
Lobby call, yeah, that's when you're
and
on
it's
tour.
Usually what, like noon?
Yeah, well, it depends on where your next city is, where you have to be. If you woke up, in the city that you're playing in, then lobby call's late. What sucks is when, you play a show that you don't get out of and back to the hotel till 2 a.m. and lobby call is at 7 because we have to drive, especially if you're if you're the headliner, you have to be there the earliest. The cool thing about being on a supporting bill is that like, that you don't have to get into town until probably 3 or 4 p.m. because the main band is like sound checking for at least 2 hours. And then you get what sucks is you get a much shorter sound check, but then your gear stays on stage. And then when the venue opens, you just go on. But for the headliner, like, if you're pulling into the venue at 1 p.m., so that you can finish sound checking by 4 or 5 p.m., then your ass needs to be, in the lobby and ready to get in the van or bus, by however many hours it takes to get to that fucking city. So, there's a run specifically in the Northeast where you have a bunch of markets that you have to hit and you're going to do them every night, like Boston, Philly, DC, working your way back up to New York. And they're all really long drives but they're all really big markets. So you have to be on your game. And like, those are the parts of the tour where I wind up getting sick because I'm like not sleeping. I'm just like, it's like, all right, back to the hotel. We have a 7-hour drive tomorrow. We have to be in DC at this hour. And, you're running on fumes and your New York show is just adrenaline. And then you next day I wake up with like a throat infection or something.
Right.
But yeah, so lobby call, sorry. Related back to this movie, they have a lobby call because they're going to finally perform on television. They have their big TV debut. And in typical band fashion, which is realistic, one of the bandmates doesn't fucking show up. He's like not there. What we learn about the bass player, about Ethan, is that he winds up he runs into some Marines and he tells them that he's getting, I'm going to enlist or whatever, and doesn't even hear the news. I guess, it's before cell phones. So he just goes out to hang out with these Marines who are just visiting LA, and they go to Disneyland and they're doing all this fun shit. And they're, the next day the band, the remaining members, they're there, they're probably hungover, they're probably tired, but they know that, this is the big night and that they got to get ready. And Tom Hanks in typical A&R / manager form finds them a bass player right away.
Yes, who's way better than their actual bass player.
Yeah, and it's funny because the guy shows up and he's like a session guy, and he
seems like a real musician to me.
Although
he's like also like a little stiff, but like in a good way, like in a way that those guys are and would be.
Sure, I've worked with guys like that. Like they make the world go round, dude. It's like
right.
They're the ones that actually do music as a career, because if you have a first time band, they don't always understand the stakes, or they or in the case of what we were talking about with Dig, or they're fucking insane, and it's hard to get them, somewhere and reliably and make sure that they're there on time and that they hit all their marks. Mm-hmm. So this, that my favorite part of the movie really is just kind of that, like, they get to LA, they sort of, they have to go visit the label, they all kind of go off and do their own thing, but they have to be back, for this television performance. And it reminded me of, like, I've consistently, like, never slept the night before TV. It sucks. It's because it's like the 3 times I've been lucky enough to perform on the Tonight Show. It was like, how do you tell yourself, like, go to bed, you have to be up in 6 hours, and and play this on national TV, and as somebody that is just generally anxious, like I remember, I think doing Annie and waking up and was convinced that I needed, like, a rock doctor, because there are these guys that will come and they'll give you like a vitamin shot or something if your throat's fucked up, like they'll give you like a steroid, and I've known, it's just a thing, but my managers at the time, like, for some reason didn't want to get me one. They just brought me a bunch of lozenges and tea, and I was like, God damn it, like, I need a shot in the ass. I'm about to go on national TV. Fuck. And that part, that's like the stress of that is real, but also it's amazing. It's like it's like skydiving. You don't remember it. It just happens. And they get to have that moment in the film, and really, really well done in terms of, like, setting up the sound check of it, and then what you see in the control room. It's
great. It's like clearly by a guy that, like, loves the mechanics of live television. Like, I love how much they show of, like, inside the control room and the camera guys and, like, kind of all this stuff. Like, it's a movie that loves show business, and which is really fun to watch. So that goes well. But during the showcase, when they are introducing kind of all of the bandmates by name, to, with a kind of lower thirds of their name, for Jimmy's, it says Jimmy, but it says, careful girls, he's engaged. And you see him sort of, like, see that on the TV and, like, clock it and be like, what the fuck? And then he gets back into the song. But as well as it went, of course, Jimmy can only fixate on that. And while everyone's kind of trying to celebrate, he just, like, eviscerates into Faye for trying to, accusing her of sort of planting that. In order to sort of goad him, where their relationship is already sort of becoming fractured anyway. And I think the movie doesn't seem to imply that she would do that. I can't imagine she would do anything like that. I don't know if it was
even the director's cut. It doesn't really say who planted that, why that was, maybe who.
Well, Hank says it was the same guy who said you had class, which, like, I don't think really. I mean, I assume it might have been him, but not in a malicious way, or it was just, like, some publicist. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
And then, so they break up, it's pretty dark. And then, the next morning they're back in the studio, which is sort of hilariously and ironically, like, the one place where Jimmy wanted to be, because he keeps saying the whole point of all of this is to record more music. And he's, like, pure in that way. And I definitely understand that. And I understand the sort of, like, frustration of like, okay, we got to do this. We got to get our picture taken. We got to play this thing. We got to do that. But, like, isn't ultimately this all leading to us, like, making more music? Like, isn't that the whole point?
Which is fair and fair.
Yeah, I agree.
And a very realistic plight of, I mean, I've seen so many tweets or just talked to friends. Just over the years, this keeps being a reoccurring thing where the irony of getting to make music for a living, once you do it for a living, is how little of it you get to make, because as soon as you finish something, you have to go out and promote it for long periods of time. And yeah, I mean, if I was Jimmy, I'd be frustrated if I had a lot of songs that I was ready to record, that we have to go out for like 4 or 5 months first and just go play a bunch of fairs.
Yeah, I mean, it's not dissimilar from being, a professional, director or filmmaker where, like, if you're making features, and it's on an indie or semi-indie level, like if you are on set directing like 30 or 35 days every 2 years, you are incredibly successful.
Yeah.
So very little time is sort of spent actually doing the thing that you are supposed to be doing. Obviously, a lot of those people supplement that with like commercial work and stuff like that, but even those are only like a few days or a week, at a time. So they're in the studio. Clearly, they're in the middle of a sort of fight. Tom Hanks is essentially telling him that, like, you signed a contract, which means that you do what I say. I want you to, cover these songs from the Playtone Galaxy. I want you to record that thing you do in Spanish. And yes, per your contract, you get, the one song on the B-side to be of your choosing. But, like, don't give me any of this ballad crap. I want something poppy. I want something zippy. I want something like that thing you do. And I mean, it's the sort of darkest that, like, Mr. White kind of gets, but, or like sinister kind of way, but like it's also not that sinister. I mean, it's like,
not that and they really should. Again, it's one of these things where, like, the tragedy of these stories in the music industry is like you just didn't read the bottom line.
Yeah. And you also just didn't know, like, what was a good compromise and what was a bad compromise. You know what I mean? Like, recording some covers of some other hits, assuming many of them might be like also pretty good songs.
I mean, Bob
is
Dylan
not like it exactly. It's not like a knife in the heart of your artistic integrity, from where I'm sitting, at least. I mean, there might be
also, if your band's called The Wonders and you're doing fucking doo-wop, like, I'm sorry,
yeah, you're not Bob Dylan.
You're not Bob Dylan.
Like,
yeah.
And so then Jimmy quits, and Hanks is sort of just saying how kind of unsurprised and common it is, and it just all kind of goes away. They just pack up and go, and that's it. Like, he, as you were saying, like, Jimmy was the talent. I mean, that's the scene where it's really treated as
the Beatles.
We do see that, like, he's the one that matters. If he quits, there's no band.
I mean, they said that was one touch I liked at the end when he says, like, well, you're what does he say? He says, well, Lenny's the fool, Jimmy's the talent. Like, fuck, well, we have to deal with him, and you're the smart one,
Right. And Faye is special.
And
they don't mention the bass player.
But that, there is that element of it, I mean, he's obviously doing a riff on the Fab Four, where it's like the shy one, the handsome one, the funny one,
yes.
Whatever. But the reality is that, like, yeah, more often than not, it's like it would be the fool, the talent, the person that's smart enough to know when to leave the room. It's, I think, I think that's the strength of the film. At the very end, I think what we walk away with is, like, this is a story. You hear about all these one-hit wonders, or you wonder what happened. I mean, it's right there in the name.
It's a very good encapsulation of how that can happen, And he even says, he puts the nail on the head and says, one-hit wonders,
Yeah.
And it's
that's why they called the band that. Damn it! Now I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Hanks lets him sort of hang out in the studio.
They already paid for the time.
He already paid for the time, but I thought that was a good touch too, because he already paid for the time, but you do have to get out of the hotel by this afternoon because I didn't pay for that time, like that's cut off immediately. And so, he kind of dicks around with some jazz improvisation, and then in walks his hero, Del Paxton, played by the late great Bill Cobbs, who we introduced at the jazz club earlier, where he kind of got drunk and got to shoot the shit with him, and it was a great moment for him, in La La Land, and he kind of walks in and they jam a little bit, and it's a pretty cool moment. I mean, I will say, there's Del Paxton, and then the sort of like, it's similar role in a way to in Pretty Woman, the concierge, in this case Lamar, played by Oba Batundi, they're both great and fun and good additions to the movie, but it is kind of like two magical Negro tropes, in the movie back to back, which is very 90s. I don't know how sort of offensive they are in that sense. I think they are charismatically performed and treated with respect, but especially Lamar has no inner life at all. He just seems to only live to amuse these white characters,
for sure.
But whatever, just we should acknowledge that
that was something
that
I
feels very sort of
90s.
90s.
This is a product of its time.
And then we end the film. Obviously, Guy and Faye need to sort of get together. I think that it's what sort of well done,
which Lamar just magically knew that's what's supposed to happen.
It happens so easily, obviously, but the movie wants it to happen. I think it's it is that kind of movie where they would just kiss at the end. I mean, I want to then get to this sort of insanely specific postscript of the movie where they show where each tell what happened to each character as if that they were
they pull an American Graffiti. I almost thought, I was is that a direct reference or something? Because that's
I guess that is an American Graffiti. It's also an Animal House, but they do it as a joke.
It's probably a riff on
but it's just funny to me how specific it is and how did they come up with these things. But like I said, I like them kissing at the end. I don't need them married for 30 years and have a music kids. You know what I mean?
3 kids in a music conservatory that they run.
Yeah, exactly. In this weirdly specific place in Northern California or something.
Yeah, and then the talent Jimmy or whatever actually winds up making
Bainbridge Island, Washington.
There you go.
Fuck.
Makes goes on with his original band, the
Herdsmen. Which I actually kind of like that because
he winds up just being
it felt kind of realistic. He
would go
Jimmy
on and make
was
a few
talented.
records.
He started a new band. They released 3 successful records. It says I think they were 3 gold records, and then he sort of transitioned into producing, and
That's
it's
probably what happened.
that makes sense. It's you could see him in the 80s producing some synth pop shit, and he's I used to have a band in the 60s,
or producing all the bad later,
80s what would Jimmy produce?
For some reason, I think it's he would produce I say this as a diehard Lou Reed fan, but have you ever heard Original Rapper, his rap song or something where it's
no,
or Got My Mind, just there's something of all the 70s, 60s and 70s guys that in the 80s are still trying to do it, and that even George Harrison Got My Mind, Set on You, or hearing in my mind I'm just imagining he would be the guy that's producing the aging 60s and 70s rock.
Yeah, he's producing Empire Burlesque by Bob Dylan.
I was gonna say probably some 80s Bob Dylan in there, just learning about gated reverb for the first time and just making things just sound like that. Yeah, I could see him. Maybe not Lou Reed. Lou Reed would have had somebody hipper. But if you ever, for any of you that hasn't heard Original Rapper, it's a lesser moment of his. But the man did write Berlin, and he was in the Velvet Underground. So anything he does is gold to me.
And then just to shout out some cameos, and then we can get into the kind of reception of the movie. But this is very an actor, a movie directed by an actor, in the sense that like almost everybody in it is like somebody. And I'm sure in 1996, like there wasn't a person in Hollywood that didn't want to do a favor for Tom Hanks,
Sure.
so a young Charlize Theron plays, Guy's girlfriend from home that doesn't like him very much, or is very interested in him. He ends up leaving him for her dentist, which I seem to remember was a extended subplot
Oh, just
in the extended cut.
didn't
Definitely one
belong.
that we
Just
did
didn't
not
belong.
need.
Yeah.
Um,
Because who
I
gives a shit that she doesn't
Yes,
get his? Yeah, it's
of
like,
course. Her dentist, played by this guy named Keith Newbert, who like apparently was in the NFL, and then became an actor. Very interesting. Um, we shouted out Chris Ellis. The great Alex Rocco. Mo Green from The Godfather plays the head of Playtone Records in a
yeah.
great one scene thing where he's just like the biggest dickhead alive, just like schmoozing with the reporters, obviously like cheating on his wife, like just like ham sandwich just coming out of his mouth as he's talking.
The
He's
one,
amazing.
the one I noticed that was weird was Paul Feig.
Yes, Paul Feig,
Feig.
creator of Freaks and Geeks and director of Bridesmaids, plays a disc jockey. He's got that kind of great disc jockey voice. I mean, this was back when, before he was an actor before he became a writer, essentially.
Right.
So this was, kind of a small part for him. Obviously, Tom Hanks' wife, Rita Wilson, plays Marguerite, the sort of cocktail waitress at the
Oh.
jazz club that's flirting with
Yeah.
Guy before he sees Del Paxton. Peter Scolari, who was Tom Hanks's bosom buddy in Bosom Buddies, plays the host of the Ed Sullivan kind of television show. We mentioned Kevin Pollak, the great Holmes Osborne, who's the dad from Donnie Darko,
Yeah.
who's in Affliction. I think he's the dad in Bring It On. I think he's maybe a longtime Hanks buddy, and he's also in From the Earth to the Moon. He's also in the other Tom Hanks directed movie, Larry Crown. Love Holmes Osborne. We have Clint Howard, the great Clint Howard, Ron's brother, who I'm sure they made friends with on Apollo 13. We mentioned Demi, and then Bryan Cranston
Yeah.
as Gus Grissom in a really funny cameo that I thought, whereas like, how it's a kind of thing where like you realize that like all the astronauts are a little like, I mean, I don't want to say the wrong thing here, but like they're a little like spectrum-y, these are
Sure.
all like math guys,
Of
and
course.
like Cranston plays him being interviewed as just like the biggest dork like imaginable, with no sense of humor, like doesn't know how to be on TV. Like it's kind of great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um and then little baby Colin Hanks has a page at the network or whatever. So anyway, I just wanted to call all those out. There's lots of little fun people in there. Their first fan, who's kind of starts as a heckler and then becomes a fan, is this guy
Oh yeah.
named who's from Twister and Lost. This guy named Sean Whalen. He's got a great face. He's been in like a million things. He's just kind of like a cool,
This is like a perfect
interesting
dork.
character actor. He's like one of the team. He's like on one of the team. He's part of the team in Twister. Um, so yeah, so this movie came out in 1996. It was very well reviewed. A lot of kind of goodwill around it. It was a well liked movie. Roger Ebert, gave it 3 out of 4 stars and said, the movie may be inconsequential, but in some ways that's a strength. Without hauling it in a lot of deep meanings, it remembers with great warmth a time and a place. And I think that's very true.
Yeah.
It did not.
There's definitely a lot of boomer nostalgia in the way that something like a American Graffiti or something, it's also like a celebration of that time.
I mean, or obviously the biggest boomer nostalgia movie of all time is Forrest Gump. So
Yeah.
he's coming right off of that, like kind of like I'm the boomer nostalgia deliverer, you know.
Yeah.
And the movie did not, as we said, did not make that much money. However, it made around 34 million worldwide off a 26 budget. So not that great, but I think I imagine it's gone into profit at this point. Like it's constantly
I'm sure the DVDs sales
cable
and yeah.
cable DVD rotation. I think it's really kind of grown over time as this sort of like beloved movie. Obviously Tom Hanks was making Hollywood bank all the time, throughout this time period, so they should give him one, which they did. The song That Thing You Do was, of course, nominated for Best Original Song at the 69th Academy Awards, but did not win, which I think is kind of insane.
Well,
But
it depends. What it lose to?
Okay, so here were the nominees. You Must Love Me from Evita, music by Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Okay.
He wrote, so he did that thing that's like such a cheat where they make a, original, like a movie from a famous, musical, and then they write a new song for it so they can get the Oscar nomination. It often just plays in the end credits or whatever. I'm not sure if this one did or not, but
Evita was Madonna, right?
yes, Madonna sings it,
Okay.
I'm sure, and she's the star of Evita, a movie I've been wanting to revisit because it's directed by Alan Parker and written by Oliver Stone, and Alan Parker kind of is awesome and like really underrated filmmaker in my mind. Next one is I finally found someone, which became a pretty famous song, I think, by Barbara Streisand. Her third and to this date last movie that she directed, which is a romantic drama with her and Jeff Bridges, which is a completely deranged movie, but pretty enjoyable. A song called For the First Time from One Fine Day, the romantic comedy with George Clooney and Michelle Pfeiffer, which I saw in theaters but haven't since. James Newton Howard, That Thing You Do. And then another super famous song, Because You Loved Me, by Diane Warren, perennial nominee and never winner. I think she's been nominated for like something like 30 Oscars or something and never won.
Is that song, Because You Loved Me?
Yeah, Because You Loved Me. Yes. Very, a staple of Delilah that my parents would always listen to, from the movie, kind of forgotten movie now called Up Close and Personal, with the late, great Robert Redford, and also with Michelle Pfeiffer. So she had two in there. So out of all of those, what would you guess won over That Thing You Do?
Probably Evita.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, that's
good
Madonna.
call.
Yeah. And I seem to remember that being like a big.
And it's Andrew Lloyd Webber. I'm sure the Academy was coming all over itself, being able to give an Oscar to fucking Andrew Lloyd Webber.
But I will say, as a small side note, actually I hadn't thought about this in years, but my mom is actually in The Life of David Gale, Alan Parker movie.
Oh, really?
She might have actually not made the final cut, but because she was a news anchor and a TV reporter, I think they shot parts of it in Austin, and I think it was like a second unit shoot where they were getting like footage of different reporters responding to the story, within the movie, and my mom was one of the reporters.
Weird. Funny. Also such a coincidence because friend of the show, Keith Paulson, who is an actor in our orbit, that is weirdly not in your short 86, but feels like he should be.
Sure.
His first role ever was in The Life of David Gale, as well as like an
Wow.
extra or something. It must be because it shot in Texas, and you
Yeah,
guys
that
are
makes
both from
sense.
Texas,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Wow, that makes
Um,
sense.
so, uh, yeah, just funny coincidence.
We
I
all
actually
got
have
we all
not
got to
seen. I have
start.
not seen that movie. I've heard that's not very
My
good.
movie
Uh,
debut, which I shouldn't dox, but it's fucking that.
Song to song, right?
No, no, dude, I was in The Ringer with Johnny Knoxville when I was in high school. The Fairley
No.
Brothers movie. I'm in one shot. Uh,
That's incredible. I've
yeah.
been I've been wanting to watch that.
Oh no.
Because I actually heard people defending that movie as like actually like kind of good representation.
Well,
Um,
they had to when I was on
and
set.
to be clear, the Fairley Brothers did not direct it; they only produced it.
Okay, gotcha.
But they consistently have um, differently abled people in their movies,
They do.
and like have kind of defended it. And I've seen members of that community defend it as well, where it's like, no, like they actually like give a shit about us and walk the walk and like put us in movies, and we get to like be funny, which we are, and we're not necessarily the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
And like we also like pay these people money, like I'm thinking of Mary's brother, and There's Something About Mary. There's a group in Stuck on, like, don't get me started. I'm gonna start defending the fucking Fairley Brothers, whose movies I do kind of love,
Well, yeah.
except
Oh, yeah.
for
Those
Green
comedies
Book,
were
which sucks. Obviously, it's when
sure.
they try to be serious is when they suck. But like, I like a lot of their movies a lot.
Yeah, Me, Myself, and Irene was like one of my brother and I's like favorite
Yes,
movies.
I mean,
growing
and
up.
I think
of
There's
course,
Something
Dumb
About
and
Mary
Dumber.
is legitimately a
Oh,
masterpiece.
yeah,
But
There's Something About
anyway,
Mary's
The
incredible.
Ringer, I love. We got to do
Dude,
an Alan. We'll do an Alan stars
Oh
in
no, an episode
at
about.
Metrograph and show a double feature of The Ringer and Terrence Malick's Song to
Song.
Song.
Hey, I've worked with great directors. What can I say? Actually, I ran into Peter Farrelly. This was very bizarre, but the so Jonathan Richman of The Modern Lovers of There's Something About Mary fame played a show at Zebulon in L.A. Maybe like a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I was there with my girlfriend at the time, and I just saw Peter Farrelly there, and I just walked up and I was like, "Hey, sorry to bother you. Obviously you're enjoying the show, but I just wanted to thank you because you casted me in your movie when I was in high school." And
Wow.
he was awesome actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
That's nice.
he was great. We went down memory lane for a minute there, but it's cool to know that him and Jonathan Richman are actually homies, and
Right,
he
right,
goes to see.
right.
He brought his whole family, but it
Oh,
was
that's cool. Yeah, I love him, and There's Something
oh,
About
he's
Mary.
great.
Those
He's great.
interstitials. Oh, I just had one more thing to mention that is interesting. Is that so? Tom Hanks's producing partner is a guy named Gary Goetzman, and he I think started producing with Tom. I think he met him probably through Demi, because they produced Miami Blues together, which is another
Wow.
great
Oh,
Jonathan Demme produced movie that feels like one of his.
love that film.
Yeah, highly recommend that movie. And he worked with Demi a lot. He worked on Silence of the Lambs. He worked on Philadelphia, and then once Demi and Getzman produced this, and then Hanks and Getzman start Playtone as their own production company. And what's so interesting is Gary Getzman is who Licorice Pizza is based on.
Wow.
Yes, it's like a very random, weird thing, but like a lot of the stories from Licorice Pizza, including like selling waterbeds, and like getting into a fight with with what's his name, Barbara Streisand's husband.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
like all of those, like a bunch of those little anecdotes are like things that Gary Getzman like either told Paul Thomas Anderson in person, or like stories he's told over the years.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's such a weird random fact, but anyway, thought that was worth mentioning because this was him and Hanks's first collaboration of many. But yes, and then I did want to say, as we're wrapping up here, that this kind of marks the end of our first season, and we're so thrilled and grateful that you've listened, and we're gonna take a little bit of a hiatus, and but definitely come back with a bunch more episodes, with some more guests this season, and a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon. So we'll be gone for a couple months, but not too long, and we'll be back soon. In the meantime, catch up on the movies and the episodes that you've missed.
Yeah, we really hope that you enjoyed the season, and we would love any and all feedback. If there's certain movies, certain guests you want us to have on. I know somebody mentioned Boards of Canada in one of the comments, but they haven't scored a movie. Well, speaking of Samantha Morton, they've had a song in a Samantha Morton movie. I think it was Morven Caller, but sorry.
Great movie.
Great, I mean, amazing movie. I mean, we could actually do a whole episode just on that movie because the soundtrack was commissioned by Warp, so it's all Warp artists. So Broadcast is also on there.
Yeah,
it's a great soundtrack. That being said, we'll see you on the gram. We'd love some feedback. We'd love some suggestions. And stay tuned for season 2 of this podcast. Should be played loud.
Thanks for listening to This Podcast Should Be Played Loud, created, produced, and hosted by Chad Harbold and Alan Palomo. Please remember to rate, review, and follow on your favorite podcast platform, and keep up to date on new free and bonus episodes at patreon.com/thispodcastshouldbeplayedloud. Our artwork is by Robert Beatty, and special thanks to Marie Barty and Jorge Palomo.